Hello, everybody. Welcome to Psych Talk's fifth Psych. Hello, everybody. Welcome to SOAR's fifth Psych Talk of the semester. Thank you all for coming, and thank you, Blaylock, for joining us today. We are excited to hear about your research. A little bit about Dr. Blaylock. Dr. Danielle Blaylock is a lecturer in applied social psychology and an assistant director of the Center for Identity and Intergroup Relations within the School of Psychology at Queen's University, Belfast. Her research focuses on intergroup relations and intergroup contact and social change and is closely associated with social identity and contact theory. As an applied researcher, these theoretical constructs are examined within the real-world context, particularly those found within divided communities. Majority of her work focuses on issues of identity and intergroup relations in Northern Ireland. She is currently leading the evaluation of the Peace for Youth program and was part of the research team whose work around shared education initiatives in Northern Ireland was recognized with the Queen's Anniversary Prize. Please welcome Dr. Blaylock.
I'm going to assume that there was a thunderous applause there. I'm going to preface my talk today by saying that I am actually quite sick. So if I have to stop to hack up a lung as we go, I really do apologize. But I wanted to thank you all so much for inviting me. I'm thrilled to be here talking to you guys about this today. And thank you so much, Edgar, for the fabulous introduction. Do you want me to go ahead and share my screen?
Yes.
Are we good?
Yep, we can see it from here.
Great. So as Edgar said, I'm an applied social psychologist. And what that means is I was trained within social psychology, specifically around social identity theory and the contact theory. And as an applied researcher, I take these theories and I try to apply them to social issues, particularly in divided societies, which is why I'm in Northern Ireland working. So for today's talk, what I want to do is walk you through the background to Northern Ireland's divided nature. I know for a lot of people outside of Europe, particularly within the US, the conflict within Northern Ireland can sometimes be a bit complicated. And I know primarily for your generation, you wouldn't have been raised hearing about what was going on within Northern Ireland. So I want to really lay the foundation for you guys with that so you understand kind of the context for the work that I do. After that, I'm going to walk you through two big, large-scale interventions that are happening here in Northern Ireland to promote positive intergroup relations. Both are framed by the contact theory. The first is shared education, and that's a contact initiative.
Exploring right now, only because, obviously swimming not great. Don't forget about an obsidian boat.
Okay. A shared education, which is happening within the divided school system, and then Peace for, which is a contact intervention and primarily targeted at marginalized communities. Then I'll end up the talk today just talking a bit about the importance of developing and nurturing a relationship that exists between people who do research, the individuals who make policies, and those who put those policies into practice. Okay. So to get started, a few little bits about me and a few disclaimers. The clever cats in the room will have noticed I'm not Irish. I'm also not British. I'm from Maine originally, so I'm an American, and I'm a trained applied social psychologist. So the issues that I'm going to talk about, I don't have a background in them. I wasn't raised within the conflict. The tragedies that have happened, the traumas have not affected me personally. And for that reason, I can give a slightly objective view of what's happened, but I also can't convey the level of and depth significance that some of these events have had for other people. So I just want that out as a disclaimer. I am viewed as an outsider within Northern Ireland. But luckily for me, I'm viewed as a true outsider. I have no Irish background. I have no British background. So when people talk to me, they know that I have no political agenda. I've got no horse in this race. And for that reason, when people talk to me about their political opinions, about their experiences, they often can be quite open with me in a way that they wouldn't be with somebody who was from Northern Ireland, who they might have to be more careful about how they talk about things or the way they express their opinions. Now, that being said, I do want to lay claim to just a little bit of an insider status at this point. I've lived in Northern Ireland for over 12 years now, doing work with charity groups, with non-government organizations, with government officials, with researchers. So I think I can lay claim to a little bit of an insider status. And I also do have two adorable Northern Irish children that Amber begged for me to include in this presentation. So they're down there in the corner. So in some ways, while I don't have a horse in the race as far as the divided nature of Northern Ireland, I do have quite a lot to say about the shared future of Northern Ireland moving forward and the peace process holding up. So let's start with the basics. Northern Ireland, off the coast of Western Europe, there are two islands. There is Great Britain here in the green and the island of Ireland in red. There are also two countries. There's the United Kingdom in the red, and then the Republic of Ireland in the green. Northern Ireland is this itty bitty spot up here in the northeast corner on the island of Ireland. It is part of the country of the United Kingdom, but it's on the island of Ireland. And from that point, you can already start to see how some of the division and conflict can be taking place. It's really has a unique position within the United Kingdom where it's not a part of the mainland, and also a unique position within the island of Ireland in that it's not a part of the Republic. It has a relatively small population of 1.8 million, and the size is quite small as well. It's not that much bigger than Humboldt County. And there's not a lot that happens here, if I'm honest. We have some good things. We can lay claim to the Titanic. It was built here. Game of Thrones is filmed here. Dairy Girls is also filmed here. And if it weren't for these issues, it would be quite a kind of boring, mundane place. But what it's best known for is the 400 years of violence and terrorism and bombings, murders and kidnappings that have occurred within the island. Now, the political history and background to Northern Ireland, you can really understand it as two main characters within the fight. And it's really an ethno-nationalist conflict. So it's a conflict about the constitutional status of Northern Ireland. There are the loyalists and unionists who want Northern Ireland to stay a part of the United Kingdom, and they're drawn predominantly from the Protestant community. And then there are the Republicans, the nationalists, who want Northern Ireland united back with the Republic. And they're drawn primarily from the Catholic community. So when you hear about Northern Ireland, people talk about Catholics and Protestants, but it's not about the religion as much as the kind of community that they're from. So it's a catch-all term for someone says they're Catholic, know that they are probably from a Republican or a nationalist background. And if you hear somebody say they're from a Protestant community, they are more likely to be from a loyalist unionist. So one wants Northern Ireland a part of the UK, one wants it to be back with the Republic. Now, historians would say that the conflict has been going on for at least 400 years, but almost everyone can agree that the conflict came to a head during the Troubles. And the Troubles were 3 decades of violence that were carried out primarily by paramilitary groups. And this happened in the late 60s to the late 90s, so 68 to 98. During that time, over 3,600 people were killed and many, many more suffering direct injuries. I think the last count was around 50,000, and most people suffering some kind of secondary effect with the loss of a loved one or having a loved one that was injured. it's not stepping too far or making too much of a claim to say that everyone in Northern Ireland has experienced some form of trauma through the Troubles. It's a small community, so every family has been touched directly by some form of violence, murder, kidnapping, or hostage-taking situation. So it really reaches everyone and it permeates all levels of society. The Troubles came to an uneasy peace with the signing of the Good Friday Agreement in 1998. During that time, paramilitaries drew a ceasefire. There was a decommissioning of weapons, and there was the development of a power-sharing government. So the government was its own. It's part of the United Kingdom, but also has kind of quite tight connections with the Republic. So it's got a very unique, fragile status. The society is transitioning now out of those decades of violence and trying to move towards a more sustainable peace. And we're now beyond 20 years past the signing of the Good Friday Agreement, and most people would say that Northern Ireland is a post-conflict society. That being said, last night saw riots in Belfast, and one town over from where I live, a bus was burnt out with people rioting over issues around Brexit. So there's still evidence to show that there's violence going on and that society is polarizing. There's still sectarian crime. Areas that are called peace walls or huge barriers that exist between communities exist everywhere at higher levels now than during the Troubles. And for the most part, communities are homogenous. So people live in Catholic communities or they live in Protestant communities. Now, for children and young people, about 32% of all fatalities that happened during the Troubles were young people under the age of 25. So they were direct impact of the violence. But the majority of children were passive bystanders to violence. So as you can see from these photos, it wasn't uncommon or unusual during the Troubles for young children to see occurrences like this. Military soldiers with weapons drawn, paramilitaries with weapons drawn. Children were also perpetrators of violence. As you can see, they were rioters who would throw petrol bombs. But all children face a banal division in an everyday life that marks communities apart from one another. And that can be the flags that are within the communities, either an Irish Republican tricolor flag or the Union Jack, saying that you're in a Catholic community or you're in a Protestant community. It could be the curbstones that are painted to markate which community you're in. The murals that are up saying that you're in a paramilitary zone or you're not in a paramilitary zone. And in a very banal but very massive way, school uniforms also markate what community background you're from. With young people who attend predominantly Catholic schools wearing one type of a uniform and those going to a Protestant school wearing a different uniform. So while on surface, everyone is white and Christian and European descent, you can see all of these different layers that very clearly markate who is who, our in-group or our out-group. So it's one of the biggest areas, like I said, that children especially face is the division that exists within the education system. The education system is divided or parallel for the two communities. There are three main sectors. There's a controlled sector, which is managed by the state, and only 10% of the pupils who go to controlled schools are from the Catholic community. There is a maintained sector, and that's run by CCMS, the Catholic Council for Maintained Schools. Less than 5% of pupils who go to those schools are non-Catholic. And then there's a very small integrated system where Catholic and Protestant students go to school together. And it only at this point accounts for 7% of all schools. What these figures mean, and the big takeaway point is that 94% of all young people attend a school that's divided along ethno-religious lines. So they're attending schools with their co-religionists or their own community. This means that there is very, very, very little opportunity for these young people to meet or form any kind of a relationship with someone from the other community. So if you're attending a Catholic school, you're probably not going to meet Protestant student, or there might be one or two in your class. You're going to sports events that are predominantly attended by your own community. It's layered and layered and layered, the separation and division that exists. But schools really kind of exemplify the division here. So it's not surprising that most of the interventions that have been developed within Northern Ireland to promote more positive relationships, particularly with young people, is based around the contact theory. Now, I'm not sure of everyone's background with contact, but simply stated, contact theory is the idea that contact between members of different groups under certain conditions, and that's key, can reduce prejudice. So the idea is that if you create a situation where members of two groups come together where they feel like they're of equal status, they've got a shared goal and they're cooperating, and they feel like this has been okayed by some kind of authority, then this should be a situation where positive relationships should form and positive attitudes should develop. The key processes behind contact theory is that idea of friendship potential, the importance of being able to develop a friendship with somebody from the other community. And it seems to be driven by a reduction in negative affect, so feeling anxious about meeting somebody from the other community, and in inducing more positive effect. So feeling empathy and being able to take the perspective of somebody from the other community. Contact theory has been tested, it's been verified across multiple groups, multiple settings. And the really exciting thing about contact theory is that even though those conditions can be super challenging to set up in the real world, outside of the lab, contact looks like it's still really effective. So within meta-analyses that are looking at different interventions to reduce prejudice for young people, direct contact seems to be the most effective. Contact that's also occurring in really serious areas of conflict, not post-conflict societies necessarily like Northern Ireland, but think more like the Middle East. It still seems to be working there too. So outside of the lab, contact looks promising as an intervention. Now, contact-based interventions were kind of ubiquitous across the Troubles. There were all kinds of these little interventions that were sprouting up here and there. But though they were called contact, it's hard to say whether they were actually underpinned by the theory. So really little is known about what thought went into creating a lot of these contact initiatives that happened during the 60s and 70s and 80s. You hear a lot of stories, and I know my partner's brother was kind of shipped off from Northern Ireland and thrown in America with people from the other community, and it was just hoped that they would like each other. So they had the best heart in mind, but most of the time you found that the optimal conditions may have been valued, but they're very, very rarely prioritized or even found within them. So it's not surprising then that these older interventions had very, very mixed results, and that I'm being kind by saying that. The majority of the results are either nothing or negative. There are some here and there that were positive, very mixed overall. So what I want to talk to you about then are two interventions where academics have gone in and purposefully designed the intervention with the contact theory in mind. So the first one is shared education. And this is a large scale intervention that is working within the school system. So shared education, like I said, it's a school-based contact intervention. And there's a plethora of research to say that schools are a fantastic place to try to promote contact between different groups. Sorry. What shared education does is it works within the separate system, and it creates a partnership between Catholic schools and Protestant schools. They come together and form a team, and the principals of the schools and the teachers act as co-creators, where they develop a bespoke program that the children can get involved in. The programs offer sustained and regular contact between students and teachers. So it may be that The program goes for over a year, and the kids are meeting a couple hours each week for over a year, or it could be much more in depth where they're meeting more intensely for 6 to 8 hours every week for the course of 2 years. So it's offering that opportunity for cross-group relationships to really develop and to promote that social cohesion. Now, it's a little bit easier for me to explain shared education when I use a stupid cartoon. So follow with me on this one. All right, so shared education is the 2 separate schools in Northern Ireland. You got controlled schools that are enrolled by predominantly Protestant students, and then you've got the maintained schools enrolled by predominantly Catholic students. The 2 schools form a relationship together. Oftentimes they're in the same town. They could be across the street from one another. And what will happen is one school may offer French and the other school may offer German. So students who are at the controlled school who want to take French will go over to the maintained school and sit in that classroom with kids from that school to learn French. If kids from the maintained school want to learn German, they'll go over to the controlled school and they'll sit in that classroom together to learn German. So while you have 2 separate schools, you have mixed classrooms within those schools. Does that make sense? I'm going to take at least a couple of people's heads nodding to say that makes sense. Okay. That's a really kind of simplistic way to put it, but I hope that helps to kind of explain. You've got it's 2 systems, 2 different schools, but they're working together. So kids are moving back and forth between the schools. The boundaries between those schools are becoming more and more porous, more permeable for people to move in between. So the early findings around shared education have been really positive. So in 2007, the first pilot commenced, and survey data on that first cohort found that for 40% of the students, it was their very first time meeting somebody from the other community, which is huge. They found a reduction in intergroup anxiety, and there was an increased confidence in being able to interact with members from the other community. Later work, which was more quasi-experimental, which looked at kids participating in shared education within a school compared to those in the same school who weren't participating, found that those involved in the mixed classrooms were showing lower levels of in-group bias, less intergroup anxiety, a greater outgroup trust, and a greater desire for future contact. We've also found that comparisons between shared education schools and non-shared education schools are really showing that same relationship, that there's something really positive happening with this contact. So we've got a sequential kind of relationship happening where participation is linked to cross-group, the development of cross-group friendship, which leads to reduction in anxiety, which leads to more positive intergroup relations. Now, the strongest kind of evidence around shared education has been a longitudinal design that we've recently published. And this was a 5-wave study. So we followed young people from year 8 to year 12. That's approximately 6th grade to 10th grade in the US. So over 6,000 kids participated. And again, we followed them. We asked them to complete surveys once a year, every year through their high school kind of years. 69 schools participated, which is 32% of all schools in Northern Ireland. 33 predominantly Catholic, 23 predominantly Protestant, and then 13 had a more mixed kind of background. Some were integrated and some were just naturally mixed. For these current analyses I want to show you, we've taken out the mixed schools because we really want to look at kids who didn't have opportunities for contact before, but have been offered it through the shared education program. So like I said, surveys were completed in once a year in late spring. We got information about whether the student themselves were participating in shared education, whether the school was participating in it. We looked at how much contact the kids were having in the classroom, outside of the classroom, what their attitudes were towards the other community, how much empathy they felt towards them, how anxious they felt interacting with them, deprovincialization, which is just a fancy way of saying, yeah, it's a stupid one, it doesn't matter. It's just kind of a fancy way of saying that you want things to be your way or the highway. You want your group your group's values and culture to be the one and only. And then a support for multicultural diversity. So these were measured for 5 years straight. And we took a look at attitudes before kids participated in shared education, when they were participating in shared education, and after. So what we found is at the student level, when we look at kids that were involved in the shared education program, there was a clear change in outgroup attitudes, outgroup trust, intergroup empathy, and intergroup contact, which is really exciting. So the kids involved in shared education had better attitudes towards the other community. They were more willing to trust them, which is huge in a post-conflict society. They felt empathy towards them, and not surprisingly, they found that they were interacting with them more, not just in the classroom though, but also outside of the classroom. So they were actively seeking contact with members of the other community. We also took a look at this for a bit higher level at the school level. So the school's participating in this. So even if you're not, is that going to change your attitudes? And unfortunately, we found nothing. So it didn't seem to trickle up to the school level. It seems to be effective for kids who are actively involved in the participation or the mixing of classrooms. But for those kids who are not, they seem completely oblivious. They may notice that there are other uniforms within the school, but it doesn't seem to be having the same kind of impact. So that indirect contact, it doesn't seem to be materializing here in the way that we thought, which is unfortunate and something I'm willing to talk about later. So shared education currently within Northern Ireland specifically, in 2007, it started just as a small pilot. Just 65 schools were participating. That's in primary school and post-primary. It's a very tiny, tiny, tiny number. By 2019, 61% of all schools in Northern Ireland are now involved in shared education. And pre-COVID, it had been anticipated that by 2020, it should reach 80%. I know that's a bit delayed because of lockdown, but I suspect that it's ticking its way up there right now. So within the next couple of years, this should reach the majority of all schools. So that means all children across Northern Ireland are going to have these opportunities for intergroup contact across schools, which is really exciting. Shared education is also kind of immigrated outside of Northern Ireland. So we've had a chance to develop shared education initiatives in Israel, in North Macedonia, in Kosovo, in Cyprus, and shockingly, even in Los Angeles. Though the Los Angeles ones, I should say, one, that I spelled Los Angeles wrong there, and two, that those are relationships that are existing between magnet schools. So they're looking a little bit more at the organizational level. But the research around these other post-conflict zones are equally supportive, which is really, really exciting for the ability of shared education to adapt to outside conflicts. Okay, keep moving along. The second initiative that I want to talk with you about then is the work that I've been doing around Peace 4. And these are youth work contact initiatives, and specifically working with marginalized communities. Now, I'm not sure if Amber will remember this from being in graduate school, but our dear professor, Dr. Crano, used to talk about muffin attitudes. My attitude towards a muffin, they're okay. They're all right. Meh. Those aren't the attitudes we care about. We care about people who have really effing strong opinions and who have been through really difficult and challenging circumstances. We want to work with people whose attitudes are so deeply entrenched and negative towards the other community. That's where we want to see difference, and that's where we want to see change. And that's what this set of initiatives is trying to do. In Northern Ireland, the peace process has been funded overall by the EU since 1989. There have been 3 different kind of phases of peace funding, and Peace 1, Peace 2, Peace 3. They're not very clever in their names. And over 1.3 billion euros has come in from the EU to help support Northern Ireland through its peace process. The current funding of $270 million has been set up to promote cross-community initiatives and cohesion and to help bolster economic and social stability. The current one, Piece 4, has 4 kind of clear programs. One is shared education. The second is children and young people. Third is around shared spaces. And the last one is a more kind of open-ended building positive relations. What I want to talk to you about is my work around children and young people. This initiative, it's a specific objective 2. It targets young people who are between the ages of 14 to 24, but specifically kids who are from the most disadvantaged, excluded, and marginalized communities. They often have deep social, emotional, and good relations needs. So these kids are really at risk of not just antisocial and violent or behavior, but also dissident activity. Dissident activity means that they are in danger of joining paramilitary groups or being the victims of a paramilitary attack. So these are kids that are really living at the edge in some of the most traumatized communities in Northern Ireland that saw the majority of the bombings and violence that happened during the Troubles. Most of these kids have completely disengaged from the peace process, and they're not in education, training, or employment. So it's a very niche kind of group of kids that we're talking about here. They are often the kids from those earlier pictures that were the perpetrators of violence. The activities that are being funded through the Peace Initiative here focus on cross-community, which means it's a program that has to have Catholic and Protestant kids together who are doing shared and outcome-focused activity. So with that in mind, that means that they're trying to enhance the capacity of these young kids to form positive relations with others and also to become better overall citizens. So to give back to their communities and to be part of society once again. So the Queen's University, and specifically the Center for Identity and Intergroup Relations, was asked to come in to complete an evaluation of the program. It's running over 4 years from 2018 to 2021. And it's having about 7,000 kids kind of go through the programs. And they are going for 6 to 9 months of really intensive contact-based youth work, where they're working with them on good relations, personal development, citizenship kind of issues. The way we have come into the evaluation is we decided that we wanted to do youth surveys. So we developed surveys along with young people from these communities that were taking place at 4 time points. At the beginning of the intervention, halfway through it, at the end of it, and then 12 months post. Like I said, we've developed that kind of a youth advisory forum. So we brought them validated academic scales and we said, please rewrite these so that they make sense to you. And they're in a language that you can understand and you can answer easily. We also were able to create kind of additional survey formats, an illustrated version for those kids that were really struggling with the kind of the academic kind of skills to be able to read the survey and to be able to answer it appropriately. And a couple additional languages, specifically Arabic, because there is quite a large Arabic population in Belfast. The surveys were exploring 3 kind of large outcome areas: good relations, personal development, and then citizenship. Now, the work that's been going on within Peace 4 is, like I said, ongoing. It's not ending until, until the middle of 2022 at this point because of lockdown. So we are still kind of in the middle of collecting everything. But the analyses from the first couple waves of the project have been incredibly promising. So what we found is that there has been an increase in intergroup contact frequency and quality, both inside the program, outside the program, and online, which is really fantastic. People are reporting more positive attitudes towards the other community. They're reporting a better understanding of their own identity. They also report, which is really exciting, an increase in the number of cross-group friendships and the perceived closeness of those friendships. They say that they have more intentions to develop and sustain those friendships moving forward, and that they're more supportive in general of peace building. What's been less positive, and in some ways I suppose shouldn't be too surprising, is that we haven't found change yet in participation in sectarian behavior or participation in antisocial behaviors. You know, there's a huge body of literature to say that there's an inconsistency between attitudes and behaviors, that behaviors really lag behind attitude change. That might be what's going on here. There might also be an issue around sectarian behaviors are an expression of identity for a lot of these young people. So they don't see it as being a negative behavior to wear a t-shirt that is sectarian in nature, or to be shouting slurs at the other community. They only see that as a part of their identity and their culture. And that's something that we've talked a lot with youth workers about, and something that we want to spend a bit more time moving forward with, to kind of unpack the development of the identity and the group norms around it, and how kind of that sectarian or anti-outside community is kind of packed within it. One thing I do really want to kind of highlight about the Peace 4 work, not just that it's working with such like a tough group of young people, but that it's also working with a tough group of practitioners. Academics and youth workers are usually not good bedfellows. Academics think that youth workers kind of fly by the seat of their pants, doing whatever they want to do to work with kids, and youth workers think academics are just sitting in an ivory tower and they don't understand what's like on the ground. So there's a really high level of distrust between the two groups, and skepticism about the approaches. This is really true in Northern Ireland, where youth workers feel like they are the only ones that can understand the young people's needs and their attitudes and behaviors. So there was a serious reluctance for any of these youth work programs or their trainers to engage with the evaluation at all, and the survey in particular. They thought the survey was ridiculous. And I'm not going to lie, the first version of the survey was ridiculous. It was huge, it was long, and it was stupid. But we worked really hard with a lot of meetings with the youth workers, kind of introducing ourselves, explaining our background, to help them understand that we weren't in this, we weren't out to get them. So we had a lot of trainings about the survey, and how to collect the data from it and how to work with kids with it. We also created a lot of bespoke documentation to help them understand what the evaluation was, what each of the questions within the survey were trying to get at. And we did a lot of question and answer sessions. I can say right now, I can see in my inbox, I've got 3 to 4 emails already from youth workers that are asking me questions about different things. We are completely transparent with them and always talking with them. And because of that, we've built a huge level of trust. And that trust has been integral to a strategy that we've been able to develop. And that's being able to create a situation where our research is fed back to the practitioners so that they can change their practice. Practitioners then come to us and say, these are questions we have about what's going on and how we're doing things. We want to know if it's working. And we conduct the research, or we try to answer those questions to feed it back to them. So there's this really unique cyclical cycle, this unique relationship that we've been able to develop, where we're constantly working with each other, and our research helps to better inform practice, and their background knowledge helps to inform better research questions for us. And from every account from the youth workers and from our side, it seems like this has been a really great relationship that's helped to kind of tailor the programs and to take them up to another level that they weren't at before. And I know it informs our research. There are things we would never have thought to ask, or we would never have thought to kind of unpick, that they've been able to shine a light on for us. So it's really been a fantastic relationship. So I think that kind of brings me, timing wise, at a pretty good spot, and kind of to a natural conclusion as well. The thing I kind of want you guys to understand is that thoughtfully designed interventions. So interventions that have really taken a look at the research evidence that exists, and then designed their interventions based on not just theory, but also on evidential support, are really effective mechanisms for promoting positive intergroup relations. And what's also really nice is that Northern Ireland is a case where you can see that they can also be made huge. They can be really brought to a large scale to be conducted across a huge number of individuals. So large scale change is with the kids involved in the interventions is apparent, and that's really exciting. It's apparent in school kids, and it's apparent in kids from really traumatized communities. So intergroup contact then, it is challenging, but it's possible in divided societies. Shared education is creating a situation where the boundaries between schools is becoming a little more porous. People feel a little bit more comfortable moving in between them. And Piece 4 shows that positive relationships can be found in even the most hardened attitudes in communities. But this being said, there's a huge way to go still. Just because change is being found with those involved in the intervention doesn't mean it's trickling out to people who aren't involved in the intervention. I think shared education was an example of that. For those young people involved in Piece 4, they may find positive relationships within their youth work programs, but they are going back into communities where contact with somebody who is other is not just frowned on, it is verboten. So there is still a really long way to go in Northern Ireland, but it's exciting that academics and research can play such a substantial role in helping to kind of address some of the social issues here. And I think that's probably a good spot for me to pause and stop. So I'm going to stop sharing. I think I'm just going to go to my last slide here, and then I'll pass it back over to you, Edgar, and we can try to do the question and answer session.
Okay. Well, thank you, Dr. Blaylock. I'm seeing a lot of clapping. So thank you. Is there any questions for Dr. Blaylock? If you do not feel comfortable unmuting yourself or throwing in the chat, please direct them to Brian Taylor, and he can help us out with monitoring the chat. Oh, we got a couple already. There's one by Joshua. Any known unintended negative consequences for increasing intergroup contact?
There hasn't been. Not at this point, there hasn't been. Hold on, I'm unfortunately gonna mute myself for 1 second so I can see. No, at this point, there hasn't been any huge negative impacts. The number of parents that won't let their kids participate in shared education has been in the single digits. There was one sectarian incident with kids throwing rocks at a school bus in one shared partnership. But the two principals came together and we were able to make it a learning experience. So at this point, it's good to say that there haven't been.
Are there any more questions?
Yeah, I have a question. I have a couple of questions. I'm curious, with the school mixing, was there a difference in how much the attitudes shifted among either the students who went from their school to the outgroup school and the students who were having kids from the outgroup come to their school? If that makes sense?
No, I know exactly what you're saying. Yeah, we've been calling that passive shared education and active shared education. We haven't been able to unpick it yet. It's a tricky one to get to because students are idiots. So when you ask them if they're involved in shared education, they sometimes answer wrong. So the surveys that the data is a little dirty, a little messy around the actual question about whether they went to another school or they were just kind of in the classroom and other people came in.
Yeah.
But let me throw it back to you. What do you think would be the difference between the two? Which one do you think would show the biggest effect size?
Yeah, I think the biggest effect would happen, the biggest attitude change would happen with students who were immersed in the outgroup school, who left their own and went to the other. Since they would be surrounded.
Yeah, I think there's some research to support that. There's been some work looking at what's called the minority within the majority within Northern Ireland. So Protestant kids who go to Catholic schools, Catholic kids who go to Protestant schools, and they do show a massive, massive jump in their attitudes. But then there's also work to show that those kids should also have the highest levels of anxiety, and that would work against the whole situation. So it's
a lot of sense.
definitely future work.
Wow.
Status differences there. When you're going into another school, you're suddenly low status. Even if you feel equal in that school, you are wearing a uniform that is very different than the kids that are in there. And the question of whether you're going through the front door where everybody can see you, or you're being ushered in through a back door to get there, there's a lot of kind of nuance there where anxiety could really rear its ugly head. So I think it's the exact next place that the research needs to go.
Cool. I have one other question. I don't want to take too much time, but if that's okay.
Yeah, go for it.
Okay, with that school mixing situation as well, or also the other one you talked about with the piece and the groups of older kids and youth, what was the attitude change, or was there a difference between the level of attitude change and like what their family of origins attitudes were? Like if their parents had really strong prejudiced attitudes, would the kids be less likely to change as much?
No, looking at the kind of moderating role of group norms or family norms. We've done a little bit of work with that. It doesn't look like it's too much of an issue, but it's something that we've got to, especially with the Piece 4 group. That's the next space that we're going to be doing some work with. But the data set is, it's not ready yet since we're still collecting. I suspect that kids who have very strong family norms will find it much more challenging to show attitude change. And I think there's plenty of research to kind of support that idea. So we'll have to see. We are doing a bit of work looking at what we call transgenerational contact. And that's the idea that the contact that children have indirectly impacts the parent. So especially for primary school kids, like you got to think a parent of a primary school kid, they need to know their kids' the friends of their children. So they're going to be going to birthday parties all the time. So the contact that the kids are having with each other is going to have to trickle back to the parents. So we've been doing a little bit of work looking at that. It does seem to show that the effect generalizes back to parents, which is exciting, but it is a bi-directional issue there. So parent attitudes going back to the kids. So it's complicated, man.
Cool. Thank you. That's really cool. Stuff to think about.
Molly, I saw you had your hand raised. Do you still have a question?
Yeah, thank you for your presentation. I got a lot out of it. And I noticed like parallels with stuff that I've witnessed with some of the youth here in Humboldt County. Last year at the protests, some of the younger, more marginalized youth were the ones that were, in my opinion, like the most extreme during some marches. And there was the sense that they're really unsupported in general by the entire community. And you could tell that they felt really silent. So I was curious, you had talked about like the focus on the most marginalized youth. And I don't know if I missed it, if you mentioned what like the additional resources were that were provided while you were engaging with them. And also my question, another question, because it's like kind of multi-layered. Do you think that like even just the mere involvement and inclusion and being a part of the program may in itself have been like a role in their outcomes, like having some status and inclusion in the study, having a sense of responsibility, right? Like that they actually mattered, that they were being measured. Do you think that's part of it?
Okay, so the first one, what kind of resources we had going in there? What do you mean in terms of resources?
Well, I just wasn't sure if I had missed something because I know the overall project is on the intergroup contact, but if for these youth was there, because I know you had mentioned the additional socioeconomic stability being a factor, and if that was something that was part of your work with those youth.
No. So for this one specifically, but it's 37 million euro is being given to these youth programs. So like the YMCA is one of them that's here. They're given 37 million euros to be able to create these programs to help train young people and to booster their personal development skills. So there's a lot of resources in terms of time and effort and skill, but they're not really being given kind of economic resources within it. I'm not surprised that you're kind of seeing marginalized kids being involved with protests or rioting. Here it's called recreational rioting. And it's often done just because kids are bored. But young people are often used as weapons for adults, especially within the paramilitary communities. The adults will stir it up and have the kids engage in it. So they're both kind of active participants in that they're bored and they want to throw stones and they want to kind of try to beat up police officers. But they're also passive in that they don't realize that they're being pawns in a much larger game. And I suspect that's probably the case everywhere, not just here in Northern Ireland. You had a second question about whether there was a level of responsibility for completing the surveys. And I'm just going to say, no, I don't think so. The kids don't like them. They hate doing them. But the youth workers like to use it as a platform to discuss larger issues. So in that way, they are gaining something from it within their development. We've had good responses from our youth advisory forum, though, that they felt like they had gotten a sense of ownership and responsibility. And some of them wanted to go further to kind of pursue their education because they were motivated and excited by the research. So completing the surveys, no, they think it's a waste of time. But the people who got involved in developing the surveys, yes, definitely.
Thank you. That addressed it. Thank you so much.
Go ahead, Benjamin. Benjamin?
It looks like you're muted, Benjamin.
Oh, I thought I unmuted my mic, but I have like a weird headset that I have to do 2 unmutes. Anyway, what I was gonna ask was, what do you think the most important takeaway is from this presentation?
Northern Ireland is awesome. There's a couple different takeaways. I mean, if you're looking at it from an academic point of view, it's really evidence that contact theory is effective, and it's effective in really difficult situations. If you're looking at it because you're into more social issues, I think the takeaway is that you can use your knowledge to really make a difference in different communities. And then if you just didn't care about academics or research at all, it's just exciting to know that you can leave and go to another country and and have a useful life within that community. I don't know. I got a lot of, when I was in grad school, I did get quite a bit of flack, the fact that I wanted to leave and move to a conflict zone. I was told that you're an outsider, nobody's gonna want you there. And I kind of didn't listen. I just did it and I proved them wrong. So if anything, that's something to take away as well.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Do we have any more questions?
Yeah, I think I could ask another question. How long has the research on the mixed schools been around? I guess I'm just kind of thinking about if kids were put together in a mixed school, would their attitudes kind of go back to being maybe more extreme if they're not kept in that program for an extended period of time.
Well, they are
Does that
kept in,
make sense?
yeah, it does. They are kept in it for an extended period of time because it's over a year, but there hasn't been research to follow-ups with them. So it'd come back to them a couple years later to see where they're at. And that's always an important kind of piece to do. Shared education started in 2007. Research around it is from about 2010 on. So anybody that's been involved in it, there's a good cohort that's already left school. So it would be interesting to go back to see where those kids are now. I suspect that the first cohort of shared education kids, they were from schools that wanted to be involved. So they were already kind of at a positive level. I kind of mentioned that the Peace 4 money also has shared education embedded in it. And that money is trying to target schools that have never been involved in shared education and didn't want to be involved in it. So you can suspect that those are schools in really hardline areas. I think it would be exciting to go to see what the movement has been in those schools, and whether that sticks for the kids after they leave. But that requires a kind of different kind of methodology of being able to track them after they get out of school. Something that hasn't been done yet, but I'm taking notes to do it later.
Yeah, I guess that makes sense. It would be difficult to study, but
Yeah.
I feel like that would be very, very important to know if it actually sticks around when they're
No,
adults.
absolutely. I suspect there's no research to say that the effects of contact would boomerang the other direction and go more negative and extreme after. It would probably just be that it would wash out, if anything. So if it had any kind of sticking power, it would be great. The effect size on, or the kind of the magnitude of the change with the contact interventions with shared education and Peace 4 are larger than what's found in the literature. So it looks promising that it should stick, but yeah, we'll have to see.
Awesome.
I guess I could, oh, sorry.
Go ahead.
I was going to say, I guess I could ask, in the literature outside of Ireland, does it seem to stick? Would we know that? And how would we know that?
The shared education, nothing's been published outside of Ireland yet.
Okay, sorry.
There was one initial evaluation that started in North Macedonia that looked promising, but it was much more qualitative in nature. So you wouldn't be able to measure it in the same kind of effect size. It was much more case study based. But because the stuff that's moving into kind of former Yugoslavia area, it's brand new. It's just starting to take root now. So it's a little too early to see what the results are going to be for that. But that area is, it's much more challenging because language becomes a problem, where multiple languages are spoken by the different groups. And that's not the case in Northern Ireland. Everything's in English. So the nature of the intergroup relations shifts because language needs to be added into it. So I think there needs to be some really thoughtful consideration about how to create those.
Are there any more questions for Dr. Blaylock?
I'm just going to unmute myself. Danny, thank you so much. This is Amber. I love seeing your face and getting to hear you talk and to see how all of your hard work in graduate school has paid off with such good work in the real world. You're an actual role model, Danny, and the world changed it. But I have to unfortunately go because I'm late for another meeting. But thank you so much. And I will be in touch with you soon so we can catch up.
Yeah, no, and I've got plenty more that we can share with the lab.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Thank you. Thank you so much. And I'll see everybody else later.
Okay. Bye everybody. That's over Amber's.
So if there aren't any more questions, I will conclude the meeting. Thank you, Dr. Blaylock, for coming and talking to us about your research. And thank you, everybody who came and showed up. I want to thank all of you guys for showing up. And please keep an eye out for the next Psych Talk. It will be happening around 2 weeks or so, and there's a possibility of it being high flex. So please just keep an eye out for that. And thank you everybody for coming.
As I was thrilled to be here. Thank you so much for listening. And please contact me if you've got any questions or if there's anything I can do for you guys.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay.